Hello. I am just writing this email because, as have many other people, I saw your latest movie, Anora, recently, and as did many other people, I really enjoyed it, but there's something that's really been nagging at me that I haven't seen any other people address about a potential interpretation of your film. And I don't know if this is appropriate or conventional at all, but I really wanted to ask about your thoughts on my interpretation of a particular side to the story. For some context, I had previously, before even the announcement of Anora, really enjoyed, I think the first movie I'd seen maybe was The Florida Project, which I still feel like I've never met anyone who had seen that movie and did not enjoy it. And I think has a really special energy with the colors, and just the acting was really incredible even. But I think what made me really remember your name, so to speak, was watching Tangerine, hearing about the process of that movie and seeing the product was really astonishing to me, and I still feel like that movie has something really special. And to kind of address one part of it, I really never had seen, I think, maybe even trans women depicted so humanizingly in a film, but specifically trans sex workers, was just the emotions I felt watching the film and the reflections that I was able to have thinking about I think specifically Alexandra really struck with me, but thinking about their experience, Alexandra and oh my gosh, I can't remember the name, but thinking about their experience in that movie, and how I felt like your approach to the shooting of to the scenes and the scoring pushed always for beyond the humor that was expressed by the main characters. It pushed for tenderness that I don't see movies show people in this line of work or who are trans as being worthy of, which I think was really amazing. Honestly, I later saw Red Rocket, and that was really a mentally stimulating movie. I really enjoyed. I had seen the zine that was made with A24 at the same time, and I thought that really gave a lot of context to the themes of Red Rocket and how there's this culture that we're really a part of deeply, and it's almost comforting because of how deeply we are part of it, that really respects someone and their drive to make money in America, and kind of how to see someone really work is something automatically almost familiarizing and humanizing, even in the worst of cases. And it's really interesting to think of that condition and why we familiarize so quickly. But to tie back to Anora, now that I've kind of gone through the other films and how I was impacted by them, I really feel like don't get me wrong, I feel like I understood this movie and enjoyed it as much as anybody could have. But I really approached it differently to even like the theater I was in, because I think because of my perspective on the other films he had made, I was really focused on Nora herself. And kind of to really set up some background for what I'm about to get into. My friend who I saw the film with saw me cry for the first time, actually, during the one of the musical montages with Yvonne. And it's not to say that I was specifically like healed, but it really brought out these tears in me that I didn't want to hold back. That felt really beautiful, because looking at what they were experiencing together made me remember something that I felt that was really special. And knowing how I felt in that moment just made me understand Anora, I think, in this really deep way, where I knew this was really something that she was committing to. And that was really important to her. And from the moment that things turned wrong, I sort of I think focused on Anora again more than the rest, and empathized with this really, shielded but honest in the way I saw, because I was looking through this lens, sadness and grief for something that actually meant a lot, and that is honestly, unfathomable. At the end of the day, it should be unfathomable to do to someone. And that just really resonated with me also with regards to things that I've gone through, but to especially think about this in the context of sex work, I think this made me really less humored because of my attention on Anora during scenes that kind of the audience would find humorous. And I think I noticed that there wasn't really a score with funny music, so to say. So I think I maybe wasn't wrong to think that it wasn't that funny. But really to see kind of in the context of work, like someone be detained for this long, and also in the context of trauma, like for someone to be literally unable to go home and like cry in their bed after being lied to in the worst way, betrayed in the worst way, vows broken in the most childish way. I think I really didn't find it as funny, and then I really found it beautiful in a literary way almost, when things sort of started to take a turn for me with specifically Igor. And I would see with Igor that from the very beginning there was, on the surface maybe comedic to the audience of a dynamic with Anora, but to me it was very subtly and narcissistically predatory. And when I think about Yvonne and what he did to Anora, and how I believe she was able to recover from that experience. I think when she saw him as a child and someone who wasn't capable of making decisions, who didn't have agency, sort of like the people who detained her, who were working and weren't making these decisions themselves, basically. There was no resentment as much as there was kind of like a disgust and a disdain. And, this is kind of setting up to how I feel about Igor, because even at the moment when, the scarf had been brought to Anora, I felt like her anger at him validated me in feeling that she actually was not humored by this, and that she sees through him and knows that this is not something someone does on accident or without thinking about it. And then furthermore, I think the conversations that kept occurring around rape really set the stage for what I'm getting to at the end of this with regards to Igor. And I consistently did not find it humorous for her to be mentioning these subjects, and not in the sense that I didn't like the jokes. I just don't think, from my interpretation, and this is why I really hope none of this comes off pretentious, also because I feel like I don't feel like these are my ideas, and I'm hoping I'm understanding them, but they are resonating with me. But I think it was just a bit of a challenge maybe to the audience to suspend their humor, and I think the context of sex work pushes people to really find things funny, and not take these people as seriously and empathize as much, and I felt like this was maybe a challenge that I'm maybe not the happiest with how people did around me, to kind of like really take a look at Anora during these moments that were humorous, or where she could be joking, and think, is this funny to her really, or is this a part of something that's really traumatic now? Because not everything is funny, and just because someone is in a line of work where they work with desire and transactionalize it, doesn't mean that passion in a romantic sense is less valuable to that person and doesn't hurt as much. And I think that's part of what people maybe had difficulty with. Not to, again, put myself above people, but I am a bit frustrated with this situation. But also to continue on that, I really have I think, to me, and it's not to say that I'm special, but I'm really I guess hoping there's someone, maybe you, I don't know what I'm saying, but who shares his opinion on the ending. But I felt like for there to be no music playing in general during a lot of these scenes with Igor, as opposed to the music with Yvonne, I felt like this was the moment I was supposed to indulge in and feel not question what I was seeing, and not worry, and just kind of feel what it feels like to me with the music, which was really beautiful and made me feel deeply. But with Igor, I always felt like I had to question things because there wasn't this music. And the friend I viewed it with really perceives him as sort of almost like a romantic hero who comes in and saves her, almost, to simplify that perspective. But I really saw this ending as, and I'm really going to break it down actually, I guess, but I kind of saw it there was this seduction that happened as this final test, because maybe, beyond it all, Anora did see potential in Igor after the distrust that I saw, at least. But I was thinking maybe at the end this was a last chance for him to show her dignity and respect, kind of. And so when she seduces him after all these traumatic events when he's dropping her home, and they start engaging in, I guess, like, kind of like, I wouldn't say sex, but like, that kind of sex stuff, I suddenly was kind of, and I think it's kind of amazing to have a movie around sex work, because none of this felt like something I needed to be warned for, because I know that it's appropriate to talk about kind of these triggering topics in the subject of sex work, because it's not appropriate kind of not to, almost. But at the end, it did feel to me like I, without seeing the aftermath, and in this way that felt intentionally open-ended, I personally saw a kind of almost like assault on Anora, and I saw her resist and want to break free and not be allowed to, and burst into tears. And that to me didn't feel like a kind of break into vulnerability, as I see so many people talking about online. That felt like how I kind of conceptualized the response and how that occurrence relates to kind of like the dynamic when you know someone has the capacity to assault you and you want to test the waters because you actually do want or like them. And kind of like, if you don't test it now, you'll never know. But it's devastating to know that someone's capable of that after. And this is what's kind of more horrible about it in Igor's case, is that everyone else was acting kind of literally at the behest of the parents that we barely saw of Yvonne. But Igor, at the very end, is acting of his own will, and no one's forcing him to do anything either way. And it's kind of also like he's the only one who really is in this position where he has the chance to treat her like a human being and give her kind of all of the respect and dignity that she should have, like, as a person. But in that moment, it instead reveals that there's this side to him that all along felt narcissistically kind of validated because maybe of her work, maybe just because she's a woman, but in my eyes, largely because of her line of work, that for him to treat her with more niceness and more respect than other people, in spite of, her past, quote unquote, is something that merits him affection, even sex, and makes him sort of defensible in his mind for pursuing something like that after resistance, after it's been like the most traumatic ever, day ever for this girl, and she's been kidnapped. And I think it's very hard for me to trust him with the way that the dialogue happened around sexual assault with Anora and Igor. So, but I really haven't seen this perspective talked about at all, and I haven't found anyone who can talk about it with me. And again, I really feel like this is maybe incredibly inappropriate, but at the very least, if there's no response but this reaches you, I hope, if this was your intention, that that theme is something that I've never seen. That challenge of seeing someone who's been, in the eyes of society, degrading themselves and diminishing their degree of dignity, to give that person the capacity to be hurt deeply in romance, and even to be assaulted. I don't think these two things are things we ever see in cinema. And this is kind of what we see also in, it's literally also what we see in Tangerine, I think, if I remember correctly. But you kind of have to think, how can we really address the fact that if we hadn't contextualized things differently because of the nature of sex work in our minds, there are major traumas that we would always identify as traumas that are happening to people in these communities that are seen as funny and aren't taken seriously, even kind of when they're at a degree that would break anybody. And it's kind of like, I think, comparable to the way people sort of take, specifically, this is a strange comparison, but young black women and hypersexualize, like the society will hypersexualize these populations and also mature and see these populations as more mature than other groups their age in this harmful way, because it comes out of this perspective that these people, because of their identity, and I think in Tangerine it has to do a lot with the transness also, and in all these movies it also has to do with socioeconomic status, of course, but we have to think, if we could somehow, which we can't, strip this factor, would we? And it's not about really asking ourselves, it's about telling ourselves whether or not, based on the data that we already have, knowing ourselves, do we tend to diminish these traumas when there are people who are in these lines of work or who have experienced these things or who have these identities? And why do we do that? And what can we do if we don't see things that way, and how can we now contextualize the contrary of that? And I think that's something really beautiful about I'm so sorry about your movies, is that at the very least, to me, because honestly the performances and the shots just really feel authentic in every single movie in a way that's unquestionable. I don't think anybody's ever talked to me about that being anything but like completely specifically the case. And I think it's very powerful to have people experience things that actually emotionally are traumas that are similar, or at least categorizably related to traumas anybody else who isn't in this community or doesn't have this experience would have, and allowing us to now contextualize this through a perspective on screen of a person that feels like a real person and allows us to relate, even though we didn't think, or at least we couldn't have pictured how we would relate to that person in this scenario without the attention to detail of a film. So I kind of feel like, regardless of whether there's any validity or anything to my interpretation, and kind of regardless of if there's supposed to be any kind of interpretation at all that isn't, regardless, I guess, like, it could be, I kind of don't want to be coming at this with a kind of, like, mad scientist, like, I'm gonna find the Krabby Patty recipe type of vibe. I just kind of feel like intellectually stimulated and really needed to bounce back this idea, and I hope that maybe this is something that really gives you pleasure to hear and doesn't like kind of come off unprofessional or pretentious. And regardless of anything, again, this is literally like an amazing movie. I saw it with my friend and we were really like, I mean, it's just really like, I don't know. I just don't even really, I don't really have like words specifically other than the kind of long discourse that I've already given, and hopefully I've kind of shown my appreciation for the work through that. But I really just want to say thank you for putting out bodies of work that are consistently so full of, I don't know, really, to put it this way, of soul and kind of like of humanity, and that feel like validating in ways that, you know, I've never experienced or known films to be. A really quick side note, it was really strange. I have to say this now because I already said, well, I'll see how this gets transcribed to you, but I have to say this. I think it was in January of last year, or I guess in this year, but in last school year, I was in a American cinema class. I'm going into biology, but it was like a general education requirement, and I basically took this American cinema class, and we had a presentation assignment on an American filmmaker, and I had literally this is in January approximately of 2024, done my project on like a PowerPoint, talking about, you know, the films I've discussed, and kind of really probably going into the same about things, not really, similar things-ish, sort of, but anyways, to get to the point about that, I had made this presentation, and crazily, sort of, I felt very, how do I put this? I felt like I had, really had an interesting foresight, maybe is a way to put it, because, like, I found out just months later that your film won the Cannes Film Festival Palme d'Or, and specifically I had also been, you know, recently enjoying a lot of the Cannes award-winning films. I think there's really been I mean, I'm not really familiar with film festivals, but the selection I've seen is really, really insane, and I see really amazing stuff. And so for me to really already have been passionate by that festival, and to have just presented on your career, literally, I felt like sort of in disbelief that this happened. And I honestly, you know, not that I know you or anything like this, but I felt really proud as someone who had just, you know, praised kind of your performance, to see this huge new accomplishment. And I actually think I emailed my professor to tell her, because I thought it was so crazy. But yeah, again, I know, I think I'll have to transcribe this into a different form of, maybe I'll write this down. Maybe I'll just send like a raw text transcript of what I said. But I really hope this is not an inconvenience in your day, and this makes you feel like the 30 minutes it took for me to get to the end of this was a good use of your day. And thank you so much again for creating, and I really enjoyed the work.